Okay. So as I say, welcome to this month's Underwater Acoustics Special Interest Group webinar. So this month we have David Haye and Irene Mopin, who provided excellent submissions for our Acoustic Research Soundings competition at the end of last year. So really excited to have both of these speakers today. Just for anyone who hasn't attended one of these webinars before, but also for the speakers themselves, the format is we have the presentations in quick succession and then have a discussion at the end. I'm really keen to get questions from attendees, so please do post any questions for the speakers in the Q&A section, which is found on the bottom of your screen, or raise your hand during the discussion at the end, and we can always get you to either type or speak something to the speakers. So I'm just going to wait another minute or so to let any final people get connected. But I'd just like to let you know about some upcoming events that we are organising as the Underwater Acoustics SIG, but also other SIGs within UCAN. So on the 21st of April, next month, there is a masterclass in public engagement. This will be an hour-long online event, and particularly ties in quite well with some of our speakers today, talking about how they've disseminated their research through sound and actually being able to describe what they've been doing just with sound alone in a little snippet for our competition. Then between the 20th of June and the 23rd of June, there is the International Conference on Underwater Acoustics being held in Southampton. So I'd encourage anyone who hasn't already registered for that to think about registering or look online at their website. And then something that's a little bit in advance, on the 8th of July, the Underwater Acoustic group is holding a data challenges workshop. This will be an in-person one-day event. We're really excited to finally have some things in person. So yeah, please check out the website if you're interested in this, and we will update you all in following webinars as well. So hopefully that should be it for me. So just for the benefit of those who maybe have just joined, we'll be hearing from two of our research sounding entries from last year for the competition. So I'm going to hand over to David. So I'm just going to stop my screen somehow. Close all of this. Stop. How do I stop sharing? Ben, can you kick me out of the sharing? Oh, I'm not sharing. Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, so I'll pass over to David to share his presentation.
I'll try and share. Let's see how this goes. So 1 second whilst I just set this up. Hopefully you can see my screen now. Cool. Right, so I'm just moving that across there because that's in the way and I can't see what I'm doing. There we go. So hi, yeah, thanks for joining me to listen with ears underwater. Oh, going well. Here we go. So if you look carefully in this picture, you can see me right here, listening to a stream nearby to where I live, and if you listen even more carefully, you'll be able to hear some sounds like this. So yeah, my name's David Haye, and I'm a sound recordist, environmental artist and musician. I'm also a part-time music technician at Newcastle University, and today I'd like to kind of briefly talk about my creative practice, which involves recording audio underwater. The sounds you just heard were the sounds mostly of plants in a freshwater habitat as they release gases in the water. For my research sounding submission, entrants were asked to provide a 30-second section of audio to demonstrate current research. I'll briefly play my piece now, since it's only 30 seconds. There we go. There we go. So this is it was an audio attempt to kind of summarize a recent commission that I've been doing for a project with Sound and Music, which is the National Agency for New Music, and I'm going to try and briefly unpack the thinking behind that brief submission now. So the project was to explore underwater soundscapes from the Sunderland region in the northeast of England. Sunderland has a renowned industrial heritage, and there's shipyards and factories around the mouth of the River Wear. So this seemed like a logical kind of place to start. So this is Roker, this is the lighthouse there in Sunderland. And we're kind of familiar with marine habitats and the sounds of the sea, such as this. Yeah, and the sounds within these oceans have been kind of well documented and popularized by albums such as in the Songs of the Humpback Whale in the 70s. So yeah, my journey started there and then took the river inland and towards more urban areas and these urban ponds that we could find more around the city. And it's in these environments that I find that the sounds I've really been fascinated with for the last 3 or 4 years, really. And here's a little example of the sorts of sounds that you can hear in these urban environments. Yeah, so these sounds are incredible, and they're kind of reminiscent of rainforest sounds, I guess, but the idea here is we don't need to travel to somewhere exotic to listen to these incredible soundscapes. And the question, I like to share headphones as I'm doing this to passers by, and the question is always what are we listening to? But that's the interesting part, is although there's this abundance of sound, there's a surprising lack of research about what's making sound in freshwater habitats, and with data suggesting sort of 2/3 of UK freshwater and wetland species are in decline, I think that sound could prove a good method to try and give those ecosystems a voice. So this sort of takes me to two kind of approaches. I'm an artist, but there's also kind of an ecological angle to this. So yeah, to start with the art side, I'm thinking about how I can use creativity to boost cultural value of these habitats. They also give new perspective of familiar environments where, you know, these are simple places like garden ponds and reservoirs, places that are already well visited. But there's interesting complex rhythms in these environments that I like to explore, and they're the kind of rhythm being at the heart of most global music traditions. So yeah, there's also a sort of the actual texture of the sound. There's a video I'm going to play at the end of this which explores the timbral elements rather than the harmony and melody of these environments. So it's just then there's about creating an emotional connection to through sound to the environment and the landscape, and also the basic desire to be heard. You know, we use sound as communication. Sound as builds communities and gives platform for people not only to be to speak but to be listened to. But from an ecological perspective, but many, there's the questions like, does the soundscape indicate a richness, and many freshwater arthropods are sensitive to environmental changes, so maybe we could use sound as a way of measuring freshwater pollution even. There are growing developments in remote sensing and ecoacoustics which may allow this to happen, and on a wider scale, and also to build those acoustic databases, because we don't have the information. We know the sounds are there, but they're not really being catalogued. So there's a more scientific angle as well. Also allows us to understand or experience the repercussions of anthropogenic noise that seep into these environments. And I just mentioned about species ID as well. It's also a non-invasive method, and I've got a very brief video here. In fact, some creatures seem quite curious about the hydrophones. So here's a caddisfly getting intimate with my hydrophone. So this kind of led me, this dual approach led me to develop a piece for the Sound and Music Commission called With Ears Underwater, and it was basically over the course of 9 months or so collected underwater sounds from marine and river and pond environments, and I sent 3 sample libraries that were anonymized to 3 separate improvising musicians. So one musician had the marine sounds, one had invertebrate sounds, and one had plant sounds, and they were asked to come up with repertoire based on what they'd listened to. Anyway, there's more of that. It's going to be explained in a video which has just been produced. So you'll be on the first bunch of people to see this. It's quite exciting. And that'll explain the whole process much better than I can. So, first of all, here's a snippet of sacs and plants. So that was the sax player Graham Wilson improvising with aquatic plants. So yeah, there's a quote here from Jonna Windren, acoustic ecologist and marine biologist, which I think is relevant for this context. So it's important to hear this field, underwater sound that is, since it's inhabited by beings who have existed for many millions of years longer than our species. It's an issue of respect, of sensitivity, and of developing a questioning approach to the environment. And with that, yeah, I'm going to play the video now. It's about 7 minutes long, and hopefully we'll explain the whole process. I'm David Delahaye, and I'm a sound recordist. I use underwater microphones, which are called hydrophones, and I record underwater soundscapes.
My name's Adam Stapleford. I'm a drummer and percussionist.
My name's Graham Wilson. I'm a saxophonist and composer and improviser.
My name's Mark Carroll, and I'm a composer and cellist.
This project is about water. Dave has taken a sound recorder out to various locations in and around Sunderland to discover sounds that we never normally hear in ponds or, sea life.
The recordings all came from Sunderland, from the marine areas around Sunderland Marina and Roker and the pier, right down to Rye up and Hendon as well, and then followed the river. We've also got inland and more urban kind of pond environments around the winter gardens especially. I wanted to connect those field recordings to musicians who could interpret those field recordings.
I came with this sort of cynical idea that it would be a sort of an abstract starting point. Isn't water lovely? I mean, I'm a composer. Composing is entirely abstract. What I wasn't prepared for was the actual sounds that he gets.
David selected a sample of the field recordings that he's been making and sent us each 6 different little clips of sound produced by different organisms underwater.
Dave deliberately gave us the sounds with no context.
They weren't labelled, so there were just 6 random soundscapes, and we were asked to listen to them.
I like that he kept that knowledge from us, just to let our imaginations do the work.
Mark had most of the marine and rock pool sounds. Graham with the sax and the connection of the reeds and plants, so he ended up with all the plant sounds. And then Adam, as the drummer, ended up with the invertebrate rhythms.
Having gone into the studio all together, he started to reveal bits and pieces of what this stuff actually was.
So that one is a plant. They're plants photosynthesizing.
What?
I had no idea that those sounds even existed, let alone could be captured by a microphone.
Sounds are largely undocumented in freshwater habitats, which amazes me. We traditionally think of music as being based around harmony and rhythm, but when listening to these underwater environments, it became apparent to me that most of the sound is more timbral. There's not really a sense of tonality. That became sort of a musical language that I really wanted to explore. So I was really curious about how people might interpret that.
The idea was that we would improvise with those sounds in mind, and I suppose your first temptation might be to think, can we make that sound? But it's more about thinking about an artistic response. What kind of things does that suggest you could do with your instrument? What can you do that corresponds to that? I think my initial thoughts were that sounds like a musical challenge. We'd normally be thinking a lot more about pitch and tonality and melodies, and there isn't really any of that in the soundscape. It's trying to think what other sounds that saxophones can make.
That's very different from any improvising I've done before. Taking something that already exists and trying to be inspired by it and evoke something of it, but without just going, let's see if I can just copy that, make it musical as well.
We've possibly each picked up on some of the things like the periodicity of things. Things that are making sounds in the water are making them repeatedly and regularly.
Even the process of accumulating my kit has been really fun. A normal drum kit, I just knew I wasn't going to cut it for this sort of thing. So I went to all my mates in the area who've got all sorts of wonderful percussion gizmos, and I got all of these shakers and all that sort of stuff to try and replicate these sounds. And then we've gone into the studio, set up a few mics. Dave sat there in the middle with his headphones, listening to everyone. We'll, listen to the samples that he sent out again just to get in the zone, and then try and do improvisations.
Those sessions were incredible because I had my standard field recording kit with me, and I was perched in my normal way with my headphones on and just kind of often eyes closed, just listening to what's going on around me. And it felt like I was actually out in the field. This strangely familiar yet entirely unfamiliar sounds all pouring in through the headphones. It was really quite magical.
So I'd hope that we're creating something that sounds organic, that sounds like you're in a place rather than in a piece of music.
It would be nice if people go away with the full spectrum from, on the one hand, being able to enjoy that act of discovery, which is listening to people improvise sounds live, right across to going, oh my goodness, I had no idea that all these sounds existed.
The point of this project is to create that dialogue between humans and non-humans, and that relationship that we live in a shared ecosystem. It's about giving a voice to all those ignored and quiet things that don't get heard. Cool. So, yeah, I hope you enjoyed that, and yeah, I think that's me done. I'll put a link in the chat if you want to see that again, and yeah, looking forward to any of your questions.
Fantastic. Thank you, David. That was a really brilliant presentation, and really interesting to watch that video at the end. Yeah, if you could put the link in the chat, that would be great in case anyone wants to view it again later. We'll have questions at the discussion after Irene gives us her presentation. Yes. So I will hand over to you, Irene.
Is it okay? Do you see it?
Yeah, that's great. We can see that.
Okay, perfect. So, hi, my name is Irene Mopin. I'm really happy to present my submission to the research sounding competition today. Thanks again for the invitation and for the prize. Before I begin, I just want to thank the partners of my PhD in France, the Defense and Innovation Agency, and in the UK, the STL. So I'm currently a PhD student at the engineering school Bretagne in France, and also at the University of Bath. My advisors in France are Benoît Zer, Gilles Le Chenadec, and Jacques Marchal, and in the UK, Philippe Bollandel at the University of Bath. The subject of my PhD is a precise characterization of acoustic backscattering strains to improve seabed identification. To summarize, I'm working on the statistics of the seafloor echo backscattered to an echo sounder. The main object of interest of my PhD is when the seafloor echo. I consequently choose to base my audio creation for the competition on this type of echo. And note that the frequency of the signal transmitted by the sounder or sonar is ultrasonic, so it can be heard directly without any processing. The plan of my presentation is the following. I will begin with explaining the reasons of my submission to the competition. Then I will shortly explain the research I'm doing during my PhD. And finally, I will detail the process of creation of the piece I composed and submitted to the competition. At first, I really like the opportunity you give us to combine the scientific works we are doing with art, especially music or sound. I'm also a musician, and the connection between acoustics and music is an important aspect I enjoy to work on all along my studies and jobs. I'm then happy to have a chance to make an audio creation with my PhD data, which I said are not initially designed to be listened. Submitting to the competition was also a way for me to be active in the UCAN community. I joined the PhD symposium in Bath in 2019, but I didn't have the opportunity to come in Sheffield this year, so I chose to participate in another way, and I'm glad I did this. Before explaining the creation process of the submission, I would like to present shortly my PhD works, which are the context and also the database of the piece. The context of my PhD is the echo sounder data called reflectivity of the seafloor, which is acquired during a survey at sea together with the bathymetry. In addition to the bathymetric map, surveyors can use this data to obtain a reflectivity map, like the one shown on the right here. On this map, the acoustic response of the seabed is displayed in gray levels. In short, we can say that dark values correspond to a low acoustic backscattering strength, which generally imply soft seafloor, such as sand. On the contrary, a high value of backscattering strength in white can imply a hard seafloor, such as rock or gravel extra. On the map, several features can be observed. They are useful, for example, to map the different habitats or geological structures. The seabed acoustics response or backscattering stats, I noted BS on the slide, is measured with an echo sounder or sonar. An example of received signal from the seafloor is shown on the right in the red circle. The seafloor echo is composed of several type samples which have their own acoustic amplitude depending on the geometry of the measurement and on the seafloor specific transfer function. The aim of my PhD is then to analyze the method currently used to calculate the backscattering strength value from all the received time samples, and also to study the impact of using several pings in the process. The accuracy of BS estimators is also discussed based on the measured and theoretical inherent uncertainty of the seabed response. The whole study of the PhD is based on analytical works together with simulation of single beam echo sounders data. And their results are aimed to be applied into in situ data from measurement in the Bay of Brest in France. For the analytical study, an ideal environment is chosen. That is, the seafloor is supposed rough in order to obtain scattering in all directions after the transmitted signal hits the seafloor. The echo sender is supposed to have a large aperture and the short bandwidth to ensure that a sufficient number of scatters are present in the resolution cell. In this condition, each time sample of the seafloor echo has an amplitude following a Rayleigh distribution. The backscattering strength being defined as the equivalent of the Rayleigh distribution parameter if we suppose that the seafloor type is the same for all pings and all time samples, then they all follow the same distribution of parameter sigma squared. In this model, time samples amplitude are perfectly compensated from the sonar equation parameters, such as measurement geometry, sonar geometry, and propagation losses. The analytical model is based on a matrix representation of the echo sender data. Each line of the matrix represents a seafloor echo from a ping, and each column represents the different time samples of the echo. If we suppose that the measurements are all done on the same seafloor type, for example on sand, then all the values x of the matrix are realization of the same Rayleigh distribution. Then, after that, for each ping, so each line, a descriptor is calculated, such as the mean of the sample's amplitude. This descriptor has a specific distribution that can be derived analytically. This distribution is a function of sigma squared, which can then be estimated as its maximum likelihood. We obtain then as many sigma squared estimate as pings. They are finally averaged to find an estimate of the backscattering strength. This estimate is consequently dependent on the number of ping and the number of time samples considered, so the n and the large n on the side. In the literature, multiple descriptors are used. They are chosen depending on the echo sender real-time inner processing or data available or at the discretion of the users. Examples of descriptors are given here. The maximum of time samples amplitude, their median, their mean, or the mean of their squared amplitude. Using the matrix model, it's possible to simulate the data and to calculate the uncertainty of the BS estimates. This uncertainty depends also on the number of pings considered and the number of time samples. Taking as an example a fixed value of uncertainty, we can evaluate the number of pings or samples needed to reach this value. Each curve on the right figure correspond to a different descriptor used to estimate the backscattering strength. We observe that a smaller number of pings and samples are necessary to reach the desired uncertainty with the mean squared descriptors. In this sense, the best estimate of the backscattering strength is consequently the mean of the squared time samples value. For this estimate, the uncertainty can be derived also analytically. This is useful to validate, for example, the simulation results. The mean square estimate uncertainty is found to be proportional to the inverse square root of the number of samples sampling. On the figure, we can see the perfect match between the theoretical results in black dots and the simulation result in blue. This analytical result will be used as reference to compare to uncertainties calculated from real data measurements. The echo sounder data that are used to compare the estimate results come from a single beam echo sounder design at Sorbonne University in Paris a few years ago. Its aim was originally to measure the backscattering strength at several frequencies over 100 kilohertz and at several incidence angles. Those results were published in 2022 in Applied Acoustics. The benefits of this echo sounder is that the raw data are available. This is perfect to test the backscattering strength estimation method described previously. The matrix is composed of the number of ping available, which is 150 here. The sampling frequency of the echo sounder is very high. So in order to obtain independent samples for statistical reasons, we have to subsample the seafloor echo. Figures on the right show the resulting backscattering strength uncertainty for two example cases of data. 150 pings, 150 pings at an incidence angle of the seafloor of 15 degrees or 60 degrees. Blue dots are uncertainty estimated on the measurement for different number of pings. And the red dots are the theoretical uncertainty that should be found if an infinite number of realizations were available. We observe that despite the small numbers of realizations available in practice, the order of magnitude of the uncertainty estimated is coherent with the theory. This result validates the estimation method and leads to discussion about the respect of major hypotheses, such as readiness or independency, when dealing with real data. If you are interested in the discussion, it will be presented at the Southampton Underwater Acoustics Conference in June. To end the PhD work presentation, here is an example of application of the backscattering strength uncertainty estimation. Thanks to the analytical formula, it's possible to add to the reflectivity map I showed on the first slide, BS uncertainty depending on the number of pings and samples used to estimate the backscattering strength. Inversely, the uncertainty of the reflectivity map can be fixed by averaging a controlled number of pings and samples. An example of backscattering strength uncertainty calculated for a short survey line with a multi-beam echo sounder is shown on the figure. We observe the highest uncertainty at the nadir, that is mostly due to a small number of time samples available at those incidence angles. We saw that my PhD works are dealing with the seabed acoustic response and echo sounder data. I chose to base my audio creation on this subject. The main material of the piece is therefore the acoustic echo backscattered by the seafloor and recorded by the sounder. I also wishes to immerse the listener close to the seafloor in an underwater atmosphere. This effect is made thanks to other materials recorded with a hydrophone in the audible band. The leading material is then an echo from a ping of a single beam echo sounder that it's transmitted two frequencies simultaneously, 38 kilohertz and 200 kilohertz. As this echo cannot be listened, it is transposed in the audible band on different pitches. Together with a stretch or shortening of the seafloor echo, I first created some equivalent of musical notes with their own pitches and durations. The underwater atmosphere is made thanks to another recording of underwater soundscapes directly in the audible band. The hydrophone was placed close to the seafloor in order that we can hear rocks and gravels clashing. These noises enhance the feeling of being near the bottom for the listeners. The process of creation then can be broken down in 3 parts. The first part is the bass, which aim is to create a deep and intimidating environment. It was created by transposing one seafloor echo on a very low pitch. So I can. So this was the bass. Above the bass, the underwater sensation was made by the audible recordings we can hear now. And to finish, the music part was added as a melody where the notes are chosen especially to create an eerie and unreal sensation. Then putting together 3 parts, we obtain the final piece. Yeah. Here it is. Thank you for your attention, and thanks again to the UCAN community for the prize. If you have any questions, I will be glad to answer them.
All right, thank you so much, Irene. That was a fantastic presentation. Really interesting to hear about how you're combining your PhD research and in such an artistic way at the end. Really interesting to hear about that creative process of layering the different sounds as well. So I'm now going to pass it over to the participants. If they've got any questions, please do put any in the Q&A question box, or you can also raise hands or put in the chat. We have got one question already that is was put in when David was talking, but it also might apply for Irene as well. So what kind of hydrophone/recording gear do you use and or recommend for urban underwater recording?
Well, there's one similarity between mine and Irene's. We both had shots of the Aquarian H2A there. It's pretty standard and affordable a hydrophone that can be terminated in either a 1/4 inch or an XLR, so it's works with various field recorders. So that's the one I mostly use. I also use another one called an Aquabeat, which is a newly designed one that's specifically for ponds. Really, it's just got a slightly different frequency response. But yeah, I don't know if Irene's got anything to chip in as well. I'd be kind of curious about how I think you said about the echo sound was up to 200 kilohertz, but I don't know how if you use any other hydrophones for ultrasonic content or not.
So for the audible band, I use the same hydrophone as you. I think it's Aquarian. So we have the same, and for ultrasonic, it's another hydrophone from the Reason company, which have a band very high, up to 300 or 400 kilohertz.
Cool. I'd like to. Yeah, I've put a link to the. I'll put the names of the other ones in there, but yeah, I'll have to. I don't know if I can afford those more expensive ones, but we'll have to see.
So we haven't got any other questions in the chat yet, but I have one. Sort of what are kind of the next things that both of you are working on? Are you coming to the end of your PhD, Irene? And there was David, are you working on any other projects now, following on from the video that you showed us? So maybe Irene can answer first.
Okay, I can begin. So this year I had to defend my PhD, so it will be in December if everything is okay for me. So that's the plan of the year.
Yeah, I've got some other water-based commissions coming up. I'll be doing a few river-based pieces, and I ran a sort of a sonic pond dipping thing with some for families to kind of get involved in listening to underwater habitats. So I'm hoping to do a few more of those events over the coming year as well. But I'm currently on a career break from Newcastle Uni, but I'm due back in the middle of May, so I have to sort of split my time up a bit more preciously then.
Yeah, enjoy the time off while you can. And good luck with your PhD defense at the end of the year. I know it's always stressful to ask PhD students what they're doing towards the end of their degree.
Panicking.
Yeah, don't ask me that question, basically. Yeah, so both of you actually had really common themes throughout your presentations of linking art and science together, which is fantastic to see. I guess a big thing for me is, do you have any advice on how to present your work? Because I think both of your submissions were fascinating to listen to. Yeah, I guess I don't even know where to start to how to make underwater sound cool.
Well, I loved what you did, Irene, about with the chopping up into kind of into musical kind of language, really, having the bass and then the melody and stuff, which is kind of a really neat way of kind of meeting in the middle, so that moving those data and science elements and pulling them towards a musical language. And in a funny way, I'm kind of moving away from the musical language into a way where I'm trying to not impose human ideas of what sound should be, but still using musicality. But it's I had a smile on my face when I saw you had the full sort of science and art thing kind of.
Sorry.
It was great. It was like really it was just a really lovely musical way of putting the data together. Because when your graphs come up, my brain shuts down. It's like I don't know what it means. Yeah. But when I hear it, it's like, oh yes, that's great. It's a really good way of getting things across. I was kind of curious about why the bare breast. If there's any reason why you're scanning there. That's a kind of a different question, but.
That's just because my lab is just near the Bay of West.
Oh, okay.
Just because of that.
there's a live hydrophone feed not far from here in Blythe, which is just further up the northeast coast. So they've got a live hydrophone feed. Yeah, you can kind of listen. You were able to listen to that online. I don't know if it's still up and running, but yeah, similar thing. I guess it's on the doorstep, so why not use it?
Yeah. I think there is a question.
Yeah, somebody put in the chat, do you find the sensors sensitive to physical movement? When recording audio, we use windshields, so there is an equivalent. So is there an equivalent for underwater recording? So I guess it's kind of relevant for flow noise or any sort of physical movement that you're having underwater. Do you try to filter that out at all, either of you?
I generally when I'm using these sounds in my pieces, I try to do minimal affecting of the processing of the signal. So, but the one thing, it's just EQing. So I usually, adjust the frequency to kind of sweeten things really and pull out the important or interesting aspects. So yeah, I've had that experience before of recording around the Hebrides and quite deep depth and the constant tidal pull on the cables, which creates quite an interesting effect, but not always what you want to record. So I think just for me, just finding the right environmental conditions. I've similarly got some lovely recordings from up there as well. But I don't know if you've got any tips other than just looking at the environment, Ari.
I look for a place which is quiet, the quietest possible, and after that I try to hear something with cars or earplugs or anything, and yeah, you choose what you hear. Actually, you try and go elsewhere, find the good spot. And with ultrasonic hydrophone and frequencies, there is less problem with anthropogenic sounds, but maybe some sonars in the water somewhere, but it's not the same problem.
Yeah, I was actually just going to say that. I suppose you're focusing on those very, very high frequency sounds, and so some of the physical movement may not be too much of an issue for you in your science side, but I guess you showed that element in your when you put the audible sounds in afterwards to actually get that immersive experience. Is there any other questions coming through? We've got lots of thank you for the presentations, fantastic presentations, beautiful, mesmerizing sounds. So yeah, very appreciated all round. Oh, there's one in the QA. Okay, how much of a problem were the anthropogenic sounds? They tend to overpower biotic sounds. That might be more towards David first, I guess. In your pond environments, were you picking up road traffic, for instance, or even airplane sounds? I've heard people have picked up in freshwater environments.
Oh yeah, I got a great aeroplane sound when a fighter jet flew straight over when I was recording in the marina, like really low flying, and it was pretty. Well, I got a shock because I was so concentrating on the sounds I was meant to be recording. It suddenly appeared out of nowhere. So actually the first track I did a shameless plug for a new album that I've just been making as part of this that project. But the first track is Water Bugs and Factories, so that's exactly that idea, that the insects are mostly the water boatburn and water beetles are in the water, but there's this constant kind of hum from the Nissan factories and other places nearby. So there's definitely urban roar. I've got a lovely recording of there's a pond that I particularly enjoy, and it's right next to a train track, and there's a lovely recording of a train going past, and the plant is doing its repetitive sound, and the train goes past and it completely disrupts the environment and then changes the pattern of the sound afterwards, which so that stuff comes up quite a bit, but they don't tend to overpower the biotic sounds. The plants are incredibly loud actually, and the water boatmen especially. The quieter things like the caddisfly, I have to try and find somewhere that's further away from from man-made noise. So I mean, in marine environments, there's always things like boat. The sound in marine environments is quite documented. About sound traveling much further, and you can hear boats miles away. So that's different, much more problematic at sea than in ponds, I'd say.
Yeah, really interesting to hear about different types of terrestrial sounds that we wouldn't often think about being overlapping the biotic environment. Yeah, I'm a marine person, so yeah, it's interesting to think about trains and aeroplanes and roads around your area. Irene, you mentioned the sonar. Do you pick up sonar in your recordings that you do when you work in the bay?
No, I didn't listen to them because I think the directivity is very sharp, so we don't hear them elsewhere about under the boat. So no, it wasn't a problem.
I picked up in the marina. I picked up a lot of anti-fouling devices. It was incredibly loud, and I was just wondering, if you ever kind of picked up that sort of stuff in the sea as well. Just out of curiosity, really.
From the boat, no, not in where I did the recording. I didn't. But maybe in some place. I think it's different in any place.
I mean, I was recording in the marina, and then I was really enjoying the sounds of the pontoons moving around and the creaking, and then I looked at the spectrogram because I could hear a faint ticking at the top of the and I was like, well, I thought at first it was just snapping shrimp or something. That may be far away or something. I don't know. I just thought it was something else. And then I looked in the spectrogram, and it was a really sharp ultrasonic spikes. So I pitched them all down, and just like sine wave beeps. And I don't know if anyone. I did a bit of looking and decided they were anti-fouling devices. I didn't know if anyone else here had heard or considered that before, but I'll put a link in here just so you can hear it. It's pretty horrible.
Yeah, it's just a sign.
There you go. Yeah, it's pretty. Yeah, it definitely hurts your ears, but it's just pitched down by a few octaves. So anyway, there you go. If you fancy
it's
something,
only interesting if it's backscattered by something.
Right.
Okay, so it looks like we haven't got any other questions from our audience. Those that are left remaining, just to let you know that on April 21st, we have our next Underwater Acoustics webinar. We'll have 3 other entrants for the Research Sounding competition. So Alfie Trelaw, Patrick Lynn, and Hugh Rice. And they're going to be talking about really mixture of things from dynamic, complicated propagation modeling, to minke whales, and then finally also to bats, so moving into a completely different realm we're used to. And with that, I wish you all a very nice day. Hopefully it's nice and sunny where you are, and yeah, have a lovely rest of your week.